Even the most chronic or hardened inmates have basic rights that are protected by the U.S. Constitution. If you are facing incarceration, or if you have a family member or friend who is in prison or jail, you should know about inmates' rights. The rights of inmates include the following. 1. The right to humane facilities and conditions. 2. The right to be free from sexual crimes. 3. The right to be free from racial segregation. The right to express condition complaints. The right to assert their rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. 6. The right to medical care and attention as needed. 7. The right to appropriate mental health care. 8. The right to a hearing if they are to be moved to a mental health facility. 9. The right to humane facilities and conditions. 10. Pretrial detainee must be housed in humane facilities. They cannot be punished or treated as guilty while they await trial. The right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment. Inmates have the right to be free, under the Eighth Amendment, of cruel and unusual punishment. The term noted by the Supreme Court is any punishment that can be considered inhumane treatment or that violates the basic concept of a person's dignity may be found to be cruel and unusual. For example, an inmate held in a 150-year-old prison infested with vermin, fire hazards, and a lack of toilets would exemplify a constitutional violation. The right to be free from sexual crimes. An inmate cannot be subjected to sexual crimes, including sexual harassment. The Prison Rape Elimination Act protects prisoners. The right to be free from racial segregation. Inmates cannot be racially segregated in prisons, except where necessary for preserving discipline and prison security. The right to express complaints. Inmates can complain about prison conditions and have a right of access to the courts to air these complaints. The right to assert ADA rights. Disabled prisoners are entitled to assert their rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act to ensure that they are allowed access to prison programs/facilities that they are qualified and able to participate in. The right to medical care attention. Inmates are entitled to medical care and attention as needed to treat both short-term conditions and long-term illnesses. The medical care provided must be adequate. The right to appropriate mental health care. Inmates who need mental health care are entitled to receive that treatment in a manner that is appropriate under the circumstances. The treatment must be adequate. The right to a hearing. Inmates are entitled to a hearing if they are to be moved to a mental health facility. However, an inmate is not always entitled to a hearing if he or she is being moved between two similar facilities. A mentally ill inmate is not entitled to a full-blown hearing before the government may force him or her to take antipsychotic drugs against his or her will. It is sufficient if there is an administrative hearing before independent medical professionals. Limitations on inmates' rights. Inmates retain only those First Amendment rights, such as freedom of speech, which are not inconsistent with their status as inmates and which are in keeping with the legitimate objectives of the penal corrections system, such as preservation of order, discipline, and security. In this regard, prison officials are entitled to open mail directed to inmates to ensure that it does not contain any illegal items or weapons, but may not censor portions of correspondence which they find merely inflammatory or rude. Prison Litigation Reform Act, PLRA. Prisoners must exhaust internal prison grievance procedures before they file suit in federal court. Prisoners must pay their own court filing fees, either in one payment or in a series of monthly installments. Courts have the right to dismiss any prisoner's lawsuit which they find to be either frivolous, malicious, or stating an improper claim. Each time a court makes this determination, the case can be thrown out of court and the prisoner can have a strike issued against them. Once the inmate receives 3 strikes, they can no longer file another lawsuit unless they pay the entire court filing fee up front. This concludes Part 3. You can move on to Part 4.